I thought now was a really good time to update you on where we're at with replacing our vehicle. Now, some of you know that the staff RAV4 EV has been with us for a while, and so has our BMW i3 Rex. And I've talked before about replacing the BMW i3 Rex because it has been, shall we say, a slightly problematic vehicle. But actually, I'm afraid it's the RAV4 EV that is up for replacement. It's not because of anything about the car itself in terms of its reliability. It has been pretty good. This window sometimes sticks, but other than that, it really is pretty much, I mean, I would say it's been serviced, but it hasn't. We haven't bothered. We've had the brakes done and we've had some new tyres, and we've put on about 30,000 miles on this car. So it's done really well for a 20-year-old EV. Unfortunately, my house is changing. We're hoping to move into the house we've been building for the last year and a half. And when we do that, we'll be making my commute slightly longer. And my commute is the very limit of this car. Well, it's okay at the moment. We have a little bit of range left when we get home. But when we move, it's going to be longer enough that we will be right at the margins of what you can do in this car. And I have no way of charging it at work. There are no chargers anyway. Whether or not there were any RAV4 EV chargers, which is pretty unlikely at this point in time. And I have no charging on the way home. So it is literally, it has to be a car that can get me to work and back, which rules out most of the older cars that are on the market. I could probably get one of the larger capacity Kia Souls. That would probably do it, or a newer BMW i3, or I could maybe get away with a 40 kilowatt hour Leaf. But in winter, when it gets really cold, it would be nice to have a bit of extra range. So we've been looking around, and obviously we've talked a lot on the channel about cars that are coming out soon. So the Kia Niro, the Hyundai Kona, obviously there's still the Bolt available, and then there's the new Soul. And the thing with replacing this vehicle is, as I mentioned, we're building a house. It probably won't be finished by the time we move in there. So we're still going to be trying to transport stuff. And I have taken our i3 to pick up things and literally filled it, as in the box touched the ceiling and was hard up against the floor, and it was snug, let's put it that way. And that is not an uncommon thing for us. We use our vehicles fairly hard. We like to go camping up on the peninsula. With this car, that's obviously not possible. With the BMW i3 Rex, it is possible, but the space in the back is not great, and yeah, it's not an ideal vehicle. So something with longer range, something with more trunk space, and ideally not too expensive. Our limit is probably around $40,000, which is pretty much our hard cutoff. Anything above that, and the amount we have to pay per month goes beyond what we are comfortable paying, particularly while we're renovating a house. So, and one might say, well, why don't you wait? Well, as you know, the Kia Niro and the Kona EV, they both sold out really quickly in Europe, and they have long waiting lists now. And come November, I'm not going to be able to get to work. So it's got to be a car that's really available now or by the end of the summer. So we've had a look at the Tesla Model 3. We've had a look at a Bolt. We've had a look at the Kona, but we've only been able to get our hands on, it was actually a gasoline Kona. And then we had a look at a Kia Niro hybrid. We actually test drove the Kia Niro hybrid, not with the intention of buying, but with the intention of saying, well, should we wait? So we can scratch the Model 3. The Model 3 just doesn't have the space at the back. You know, I brought home a 30-inch oven to go into our new kitchen. That barely fit in the i3. It isn't going into the Model 3 without a fight. Sorry, Tesla fans. Yeah, I could wait for the Model Y, but how do I get to work for a year? Let's put it that way. So, not the Tesla. The Chevy Bolt, yeah, I mean, I've driven one before. I've driven the Transport Evolved Bolt. We took it down to Las Vegas, and it's a great car. I actually really like it. Again, the trunk space isn't great. Similarly, with the Kona, it's not perfect. It does have about 60 litres more space in the boot with the seats up, which is kind of nice, but it has a bit less space when you put the seats down. And then there's the Kia Niro, which I actually really like. I'm not sure about the performance of the Kia Niro EV. I hear it's a bit more tame than the Kona and the Bolt, which is slightly disappointing because I rather like that smile, but it has pretty much everything we'd want. The difficulty here is that we live in Washington. If we lived in Oregon, things would be a lot easier. If we lived in California, things would be a hell of a lot easier, because Washington is not a zero-emission vehicle mandated state, which means that although we sell quite a lot of EVs proportionally in Washington, we don't get all of them, because car companies tend to stick to the ZEV states, particularly for vehicles available in limited numbers. And while Hyundai and Kia both said initially that they would sell cars to anyone in any state, Hyundai have now said no. I got a lovely email from Hyundai which said the Hyundai Kona is not going to be available in your state. It didn't give me a timeline for when it would be, but it said it's not available now. Would you like to buy a gasoline or a hybrid? And I went, no. And then they said, would you like to buy an Ioniq? And no. No, the Ioniq, no. $30,000 for a car that only has 100 miles range, not happening at this point. So I have actually been looking outside the state quite a lot, trying to work out whether I could get my hands on a Hyundai Kona or a Kia Niro. Now, the Kia Niro isn't out in the US yet, which is kind of odd because it's been out in Europe for a while, and it was promised here at the end of 2018 and then early 2019, and then now we're entering Q2 of 2019, and the timeline seems to have shifted to summer 2019. One of the local dealers said we're expecting them in for May. Another one handily said they'll be coming in next week, but has now not called me, so I'm presuming that they did not come in this week. And there's still no actual pricing officially from Kia. I have seen something which cited a price of $37,495, which would be fine, we could do that. But that's for the base model, and I do have some concern that the base model might not come to Washington State, because the base model of the Soul did not come to Washington State. It was a California-only vehicle. So what happens if we get to the summer and the Kia Niro, I can't get my hands on it for whatever reason, the Hyundai Kona has sold out, and the Bolt has lost its $7,500 tax rebate? Well, suddenly I'm stuffed. And there is also the background pressure that the federal tax rebate for electric vehicles is under pressure. While I understand that that probably won't go away until December, there is the possibility that there might be something that happens to it sooner than that. I do not know enough about the American political system to know whether it is absolutely set in stone that this cannot be removed at this point. And even if it can't, we don't really want to be waiting until the last minute to get a car, because that's going to be very stressful. Instead, I've spent the last few weeks trying to get my hands on a Hyundai Kona. And it's been a challenge. You would think if you want to give someone $40,000, I mean, granted most of that's going to be the bank's money, but if you wanted to give someone $40,000, you'd think they'd be keen on that, but actually, no. So there have been very few of them available, particularly in Oregon, which is a state where I could actually easily get there to get the vehicle. We're now looking at dealers in California. So Hyundai have not, as far as I can tell, sent any SELs to Oregon, which is the base spec model. They have, however, sent some of the limiteds. I've been in contact with a bunch of dealers, and I get emails like this one, which is really helpful. So, as you know, these are not in abundant supply right now, and we're not anticipating things to improve in the next 2 to 3 months. However, the Kona EV I have here is a nice white limited, which is sort of the middle-range vehicle. And then at the bottom it has a listing for the vehicle, which is the manufacturer's suggested retail price of $42,330. And then it has their price, $47,440. So just a handy little $5,000 markup. And that's actually pretty good, it seems, in terms of the Kona, because it is so popular and in such short supply. And the question is, how do I get my hands on one which I'm not paying through the nose for, because I can't afford to pay through the nose for a Hyundai Kona? So we're now talking to a dealer down in California who at least were listing cars at the manufacturer's retail price. They say they're a large volume dealer and they're happy to ship up to Washington. A lot of the dealers that I've spoken to in California just stop talking to you. Literally, they might as well hang up the phone. In emails, they don't reply. When you talk to them on the phone, they say they'll get back to you and they don't. If you say you're not in California, you're trying to buy from out of state, which is really frustrating because that is the only place I've seen the SEL, which is the model that we want. It may be that we end up buying a Bolt. Obviously, we are 3 days away from the federal tax rebate shifting from 7,500 to 3,750, which is really annoying. There have been fire sale prices on the Bolt recently. It's been down at under 35,000, so we've been talking 31, 32, some cars down as low as 30,000, which is incredibly cheap for a Bolt, and it's tricky not to buy one of them, but I think the Kona's going to suit us a bit better. 60 litres is quite a lot of space. But it has left me thinking, you know, Hyundai and Kia are sister companies, and they knew that they had a limited battery supply for these vehicles. They've had problems with battery supply in the past. With the Ioniq, they had problems with battery supply. And it makes me wonder why they didn't foresee this. It frustrates me that you can't pre-order the car, because if they know that you are going to have a backlog of orders, being able to say, I'm going to have a car and I want it delivered by, you know, the end of May would be fine. And, you know, June, fine. July, fine. I'm fine with waiting. I just need to know that the car is coming. So Hyundai and Kia must have known ahead of time that they would have problems sourcing the batteries for these vehicles. They have capacity to build them. They say they have capacity for about 10,000 a year, which is not an enormous number by any means. But given that ahead of time, why wasn't there some system in place to make sure that people were not disappointed? Because I think a lot of people have been very disappointed with the availability of these vehicles. And I know a lot of you are saying, well, they're compliance vehicles. And to be honest, now in the US, they are having to be sold as essentially compliance vehicles to meet the requirements of the ZEV mandate. They're having to shuffle the cars around and make sure that each state that has a ZEV mandate has enough vehicles that they can get them enough money back. And it's really like they need to get enough credits for the vehicles. And that is really tricky, but it also leaves a bad taste in the mouth of consumers. I am torn between the fact that these are probably the best vehicles for us, but also I'm not really very impressed with them right now. And do I want to give them my money? And then, well, if people don't buy the compliance vehicles, what argument is there that they should then go on and produce more? If they're not selling the electric vehicles that they build, then they can say, well, there's no demand. If they sell all of them, then it's much harder to go, and there's a vocal crowd saying we want more, then it's much harder for them to say there's no demand. So it's a really tricky situation. I'd be really interested in your comments below. If you have other suggestions for vehicles we should be looking at, let me know, and we'll let you know the outcome of this. If you want to support us, check out the links below, and we'll be back with more videos tomorrow.